David, thanks so much for joining me in the lair. It's an exciting time for you because you got a new book coming out, and I definitely want to. Because nobody's listening to us. I really want to know the real, the real meat behind maybe what couldn't get into the book, or kind of what prompted you to pursue this, because you've had two very, very successful books that have become part of the lexicon. And so I've got a notebook full, ready to take some notes if you don't mind, because I really look at you as it really is someone that's really directed me in my life.
Thank you,
so
Josh.
I bought the New Rules of PR marketing a long time ago when it came out. And that was a part of my decision. Now, first off, my back was kind of against the wall. So when I launched Savings Angel, like 10, 11 years ago, like I had no money. Like, so I'm relying on like guerrilla PR, guerrilla marketing, and I couldn't pay for advertising. So the only thing I could do was just become a brand journalist and just say, listen, I'm just going to become a subject matter expert. And I know I'm not going to be able to do a lot of selling when I go on these stages or when I go on the radio, TV, blah, 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 blah. But maybe if I give enough value, maybe people are smart enough that I'll say something to inspire them to kind of take that next step. But could you kind of, when someone asks you to kind of sum up what are the new rules of PR and marketing, like how do you explain that?
Sure, of course. And thanks for having me on, Josh. I really appreciate it. I'm glad no one else is listening in, so we can really talk in a way that we can really get down and dirty here. So
yeah.
I spent 15 years as a sales and marketing guy, and the rules when I was doing that in the 1990s, early 2000s was you had to pay for advertising.
Yeah.
There was no choice really, because you didn't have an option. You had to pay to advertise: magazine, radio, television, billboards, direct mail, trade show booth space, whatever it is. And then the other rule was that you had to convince the media to write or broadcast about you. And another rule was that you had to have an army of salespeople or people in your shop or whatever it is to deal one-on-one with other people. So I realized that with the rise of the web and the rise of social media, that those are no longer true anymore. Those rules were no longer the rules. So the new rules of marketing and PR, as I describe them, are that you can create the kind of content that will reach people. You can create a blog or a YouTube channel or a podcast like we're doing right now, or you become active on social media. So in a sense, you can control your own destiny. And I was really lucky because my early career was spent in the real-time news business. I worked for companies like Dow Jones and Thomson Reuters prior to the web, and that gave me an unfair advantage in terms of how content is put together and created and how real-time content works. So when the web came around, 1995, roughly, social media starting roughly 2005-ish, I already had a head start. So that allowed me to write this book, and I was able to see something that really nobody else saw. And that book originally came out 2007. It's now in the 6th edition. It's been published in 29 languages, and it's sold 400,000 copies just in English. So it's really become a remarkable thing for me in my life to be able to have had this crazy international bestseller.
You know, what I see with still far too many PR agencies and PR departments, PR professionals, is this idea, and I can speak on this as a syndicated newspaper columnist. I get bad pitches nearly every day.
Yeah.
And they have absolutely nothing to do with what I would ever write about. And terrible. It's just written in a, we just launched version 3.14X of our new product. And trust us, this is really important news. It's like, what? No, nobody cares.
Right. What it is that there is so little personalization going on right now. And I get those pitches as well every single day. and you probably get way more than I do, but I get these pitches and it's clear that they've just copied and pasted, or worse, they have a list of 1,000 people they're sending the exact same message to.
That's exactly it.
And they all get deleted. I've probably in my career gotten 10,000 of those pitches.
Yeah.
And every single one has been deleted. You know, what a waste of cyberspace.
Yeah. And I think worse is that it reflects negatively on the person who's doing the outreach and the brand itself.
Oh yeah.
And I feel bad. I mean, I feel bad for the brand, because the brand is probably paying this professional, quote unquote, big money. And I'm like, man, this is the best they got. So, when people ask me if the old way of doing PR works, I said, well, it works about as well as spamming. Spamming works. It's kind of like the Jim Carrey. So you're saying there's a chance, Yeah, I guess there's 1 out of 1,000,000, but is that really the way we want to grow a company? And I just, do you think then that is it kind of slowing down to speed up? Is it investing in relationships? Would you say that that's more in line with your philosophy?
So I think that there is room for traditional media relations. Now, I draw a very big distinction between what's public relations and what's media relations, because public relations is how an organization deals with the public. And public relations means that you can deal with your public in any way you like. That can include Twitter, that can include face-to-face. There's all sorts of ways that a company can deal with the public. But traditionally, public relations has been exclusively media relations, because prior to 25 years ago, the only way you could reach the public was through the media. The problem is that most companies believe that still to be true, and they insist on trying to go through the media. But there still is a role for the traditional skill set of a media relations person, someone who knows the journalists, knows how they think, is able to help companies to craft the way they work with journalists. If they have a crisis, to be able to help them to work through the crisis. If they have important new news to get out there, to do it in an intelligent way. But I think that that's a very small subset of public relations.
Wow. Yeah, and I think that, so that's really the big evolution that's taken place over the past 12, 15 years, is that media are no longer the gatekeepers to audiences.
Correct.
And you've got more than just those two roads to get to audiences.
Well, look at the current president of the United States as we're having this conversation. All he does is get on Twitter. He's got 46 million followers, and all the media follow his Twitter feed. And that can be any of us. If you're clever about the people that you reach through social networks, you're essentially, number one, bypassing the media, and number two, training the media to look at your feed to be able to talk about you. And all of us can do that. It's not just something for President Trump. It's something that anybody can do. He happens to be the master at it. Now, I'm not saying that I agree with his politics, or I do or don't agree with his politics, not a political discussion, but from the perspective of relating to his public, he's a master at going direct, and all of us can go direct, just the way that Trump does. Yeah.
So in terms of newsjacking, I want to kind of follow the timeline here as we get up to FANOCRACY. So the concept behind newsjacking is simply, and the way I kind of talk about this is, if you're pitching a journalist or pitching the media, and their response is, well, I mean, I guess we could do a story on that. We weren't really planning on it. That's not the response you want. No. And I think that the perfect response you want is like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. Because I don't know how you read my mind, wink, wink, but I have a deadline that I have to meet. We have to do a story on this. Thank you so much for raising your hand and saying, I can help. Is that kind of a good intro to
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. You know, the traditional public relations approach is that media relations approach is that you write a press release on your time. What newsjacking does is it's an understanding of the news cycle, and every news cycle breaks in exactly the same way. The news story starts, it gains in interest, it has a peak, and then it falls off. It's a bell-shaped curve. And so if you have an area of expertise, and it doesn't matter what it is, but you have an area of expertise, and we all do, we all are expert in something, and you create real-time content in the form of a blog post or a tweet using a hashtag or a live stream video or a YouTube video, whatever it might be, or you speak from the podium, whatever it might be, that injects your idea into that breaking news story, then you have an opportunity to have the media, as they're looking for people to quote in their stories, they're so excited because they found you. I'll give you just a quick example. One of my favorite examples, Joe Payne was the CEO of a company called Eloqua, and they're a software company. Their biggest competitor was acquired, a company called Market to Lead by Oracle, and somebody tweeted Joe and said, hey, your biggest competitor was acquired. So he went on Google and found that that the news was true. It had just been released like moments before, and the only reference to that acquisition was 3 sentences on the Oracle website. So now you know, as a journalist, you got to write a story with 3 sentences from the acquiring company. There's no other information out there. So what Joe did, remember, he's the CEO of the competitor. He wrote a blog post talking about what the industry is, giving quotes, giving statistics, talking about what it will like to have Oracle be a part of this niche in the software world. And then he was quoted in every single story that was written about that acquisition. Remember, he's the CEO of the competitor. Then he generated $1 million worth of new business because people saw him in the stories. Then a year later, Oracle bought his company for $650 million. And I calculated that the added purchase price based on the revenue he generated from that blog post was an extra $15 million. So I call this the $16 million blog post, 2 hours work of 16, and he got $16 million. Now that's obviously an outlier, but that's the idea of how this concept of newsjacking works. And I'm so excited that newsjacking, which I essentially invented about 10 years ago, has now become so popular that it was named as a new word in the Oxford English Dictionary.
Amazing.
Kind of amazing.
Did you actually, now, were you able to buy a hardbound copy of the dictionary? It's kind of like, buying a copy of the newspaper when you're on the front page. Were you able to buy a copy of that dictionary and have it printed in there?
I need to do that. I haven't, because it was early 2018 when that was announced. So by now it's in the print version. I got to do that. It's very clever of you to even mention that, because I didn't. And they mentioned my name when they made the announcement of the new. I think there's like 10 words that year that they introduced. But anyway, newsjacking works. It's fun. It makes marketing fun again, and it's a great way to get noticed.
Yeah, look at that. It's kind of funny. I have to look on Amazon. Can you buy a dictionary?
I know. It's kind
there
of
it
ironic,
is. There's the new Oxford American Dictionary. It's available hardcover, $34.59.
I'm going to have to buy one. I'm glad you mentioned that. That's a really cool idea. You have a brain that's been conditioned a certain way. It's, I know you deal with that yourself. And give me the proof point, right?
Yeah. So David, so what precipitated FANOCRACY then?
So, as we've been talking about, I'm one of the pioneers of the new ways to reach people through the web, through social media.
Yeah.
And about 5 years ago, I started to become A little bit, and this is because we're friends and it's just you and I talking and there's no one listening in. Um, I became a little disillusioned with what I created. You know, a little disillusioned with the idea that people can spam each other, you know, spam potential customers, that the media, you know, the media gets all of these, we talked about earlier, terrible pitches, that now those terrible pitches were being then turned into tweets and LinkedIn connection requests, and that people are doubling down on social media rather than using it effectively, and that people were building websites in order to entrap people with their click funnels and so on, and that the whole idea of what I thought was a really new, interesting way to reach people, and it still is, by the way, and it's not going away, has so many dark elements to it. And recently, the whole rise of artificial intelligence and bots and so on is such that, you know, when you engage with a company, it's a whole bunch of algorithms deciding what they feed you, and you can be having a conversation on a social network and not even realize that you're connecting to a robot, to a bot. So I am firmly in the belief that the pendulum has swung too far into the direction of superficial online communications at a time that all of us are hungry for a true human connection. And it's also happening in the political world. You know, we've become so polarized, not just our country, but all over the world. And so I was thinking about this over the last, starting 5 years ago, and I said to myself, I was literally the first person to write a book on the new world of how to reach people on the web using marketing. I wrote the first book on this topic. And I need to be among the first people to begin talking about what's next. So I started having conversations with my daughter, Reiko. She's 26 years old now, so she was 21 years old at the time, finishing up a neuroscience degree at Columbia University at the time. And I said, Reiko, what is it with the crazy thing that I love to do to go to rock concerts? I've been to 790 rock concerts. I actually have a spreadsheet with all the bands I've seen. Seen the Grateful Dead 75 times. And I said, you know, I dig so deep into this fandom. And she said, I know, Daddy, I'm so into Harry Potter. Not only have I read all of the books multiple times and seen the movies, but I just finished a 90,000 word alternative ending to the Harry Potter series where Draco Malfoy is a spy for the Order of the Phoenix. And I put it on a fan fiction site, and thousands of people have read it, and hundreds of people have commented on it. I have dug deep into Harry Potter, and every year I go to Comic-Con, I get dressed up with my friends. You know, what is it with us? Are we crazy? And so we began to research this idea of fandom. What makes somebody like me go to 75 Grateful Dead concerts? What makes my daughter spend a year of her life writing an entire alternative ending book to the Harry Potter series to give away for free? What makes any of us dig into the things that we're passionate about? And then that turned into a book project. The title ultimately, which by the way took us a long time to come up with, but the title ultimately became FANOCRACY, Turning Fans into Customers and Customers into Fans. And our friend Tony Robbins wrote the foreword to the book. But we then spent 3 years researching. We talked to neuroscientists, we talked to people who have built huge fan bases, whether they're musicians or companies, and then we looked into the elements of how and why people become fans of something, as well as how companies and people can develop fandoms. And so excited to have done it with my daughter, because clearly a different generation. She's my daughter, clearly a different gender. Being a woman, she's mixed race, and she has this neuroscience background, so she comes at it from a scientific perspective. She's finishing up her medical school degree now and just about to start her residency program early next year. And so she has a very, very, very different take on fandom, being a millennial mixed race woman who loves Harry Potter, compared to me, you know, who's a 50-something-year-old white man who likes the Grateful Dead. So we were able to collaborate in a really cool way.
So, so then, you know, with social media, which everyone has access to, what are some best practices? Like, how does someone create fans as opposed to just followers? So, like, I could come across an account like, I'm moderately interested in what they have to say. What is that life cycle then? And is it come down to the type of content that we share? How do we enroll people into our purpose? I would assume that would be part of it as well.
So there's a number of different elements we identified, but the one I find the most fascinating that is important for both face-to-face as well as online connection is it comes from neuroscience, and it's the science of proximity. And so this is a really important one because it's something that every single person can do. It's something that is really easy. And here's the basic neuroscience behind it. It turns out that all humans are hardwired to be conscious of the other humans around us. It's non-negotiable. It is in our deep, dark brain from millennia ago. It is hardwired into us. So a neuroscientist named Edward T. Hall, about 60 years ago, pioneered what he called the zones of influence, or the zones of proximity. There's 4 of them that he identified. So Reiko and I, my daughter and I, have expanded this concept in a couple of different ways, and it goes like this. So the first zone is anybody who's more than 20 feet away from you. Those people, our brains are conscious of, but we're not really too worried about. Anybody who gets within 20 feet roughly of us, up to about 4 feet, that's called the social zone. So that's when you walk into a room. When you walk into a room, the people around you are in your social zone. And those people, our brains begin to track. Again, we cannot help it. It's hardwired into our brains, neuroscience. We begin to track those people. What we want to know, are these people friends or foes or possible mates? That's what that's what our brain is telling us. And we can't help it. Then you've got the personal zone, which is between about 4 feet and 1.5 feet. That's cocktail party distance. And
so
then
you said 4 feet to
about
1.5
feet. 1.5 feet.
Right.
Yeah. And then anything closer than 1.5 feet is called intimate space. That's only used for very close personal friends or family members. Doesn't really count for working on fandom. And then, so what we humans do is there is no question that the closer you get to somebody, the more powerful the shared human emotions. So if you're in a situation where there's fear related, let's say you get into a crowded elevator, or even an elevator with just one other person, you're now in the social or personal space of people you don't know. That's why you feel uncomfortable. Or if you go into a cocktail party, you see some friends and you go over there, you have incredibly powerful emotions going on, positive emotions, because the closer you get to someone, the more powerful the shared emotions. So that's an important concept when thinking about how you build fans, because the more you can bring people in proximity with like-minded people, the more fans you're going to develop. So what does that mean? That means If you can host events and bring people together, that's incredibly powerful. If you can meet customers one-on-one, that's incredibly powerful. If you can do a tour of your customers' offices or bring them to your office, that's incredibly powerful. But it goes even deeper, because I'm getting to your question, which you asked about social media. It goes even further because of something, a more neuroscience called, I hope I'm not geeking out too much on neuroscience, called
I'm digging it.
called mirror neurons. Mirror neurons are the part of your brain that fire when you see somebody doing it as if you were doing it yourself. So the way that this interesting concept works is, if I do something, my brain fires. You know, I eat something, drink something, see something. But if you see me do something, your brain can fire as well. So here's an example. If I take a bite of a lemon, oh my gosh, I can feel it instantly. It makes my face scrunch up, my eyes close, my mouth immediately begins to water, my mouth sort of puckers up a little bit. It is a lemon is an incredibly powerful thing to bite into.
Even thinking about it, I'm experiencing some of those feelings.
That's because of mirror neurons. This is why when you see someone on television frequently, you feel you know them, or why you might feel sad or happy or cry at a movie, because of mirror neurons firing. It's as if you're experiencing it yourself. So what that means for us in developing authority, for example, or developing fans, for example, using an online tool, is that the more video you can use and the more images you can use of people, yourself, your employees, your customers, your partners, where they're framed such that you're in their personal space, so within 1.5 to 4 feet, the better. This is why, fascinating, right? Fascinating. So this is why if you do a webinar, having yourself on camera is way more powerful than not being on camera.
Oh, yes.
This is why people's social feeds very frequently have way more engagement around photos where it's as if the photo you're looking at, you're in somebody's personal social space.
As opposed to, I'm way off in the distance.
Right, as opposed to way off in the distance, or as opposed to no people in it at all. Because again, the idea of proximity, the closer you are to somebody, the more powerful the shared emotions, and the idea of mirror neurons, that you don't even have to be physically close to someone if they feel as though you are, because of something virtual. So a little bit of geeking out, I know, about the neuroscience aspects of it, but we found this to be one of the most powerful ways to build fans. Now, you and I have both been to a Tony Robbins event. I've actually spoken.
You've been to a few more. I've been and I think you had a different seat than I did.
I was on stage. I've spoken at Tony Robbins Business Mastery events for 5 years.
Amazing.
But you've been to Tony Robbins events. Now, one thing that Tony does, I also do, but very few speakers do. I do it every single speech I deliver. Tony does it every single event he ever hosts. And that is walk into the audience. And be physically close to, in the personal space of some of the audience members. Now you remember that. He does that a lot, you know, he does that a lot.
Yes.
And he may shake someone's hand, he may talk to somebody one-on-one, he may put his hand on someone's shoulder. What he's doing is he's doing what I just talked about. It's close physical proximity, which is a very powerful shared emotion between Tony and one other person, or as he walks around a handful of people. But because he broadcasts himself on video for all of the audience to see, even if you're in the back row and you see Tony approach somebody in the front row, have a conversation with that person, him or her, maybe put his hand on their shoulder, maybe look into their eyes. You seeing that on camera, because of the power of mirror neurons, you believe that you are having the same conversation with Tony as that other person is, and that's incredibly powerful. And I've used that technique since I learned this technique. through another neuroscientist named Nick Morgan, who taught me this technique. And we quote him in the book too. Nick shared this idea with me. My speeches have become way more powerful. I get more standing ovations. I get more great reviews of my speeches because I go into the audience for a brief period of time, and it's on camera, so everyone thinks I'm talking directly to them. Talk about authority. Talk about building fans. And it's such a simple technique that almost nobody uses, because they are staying in the public space of their audience by being on the stage, which is what most people never leaving the stage.
What a great analogy too, then, to think about that in how can we do that in social. And I think it's really shaping what we want to do. We want to do less broadcasting on social and more, feeling like, I'm holding the camera right here and we're having this, intimate conversation, and I'm telling you how I'm feeling. And I can see how we can implement more of that, as opposed to, inspirational quotes are great, but how about, I think would be more powerful is, okay, here's the quote, but let's hey, it's just you and me right here. Let's talk about, how I fail at this all the time. Which brings me, David, to my next question. In terms of building a fan base, I heard this and I'd love your perspective on it. Is that, you can share your attractive character, and that's good for maybe attracting people to you, but that if it's just the attractive character, that it's kind of, you do that to attract people to you. But if you want people to engage with you, share your vulnerabilities, share your imperfections, and share your humanness on a regular basis. What's your take on that?
So I think all of those are elements, and we in the book we have actually 10 different points that we talked about. We just spent 15 minutes on one of them, which is the whole idea of proximity. Another point that we talked about, which is what you alluded to, is the idea of making sure that you're always telling the truth and that you're always being transparent and authentic. So that's another element. But there's something kind of hidden in the question you asked me, which you may not have thought of, which we found to be really, really important and really, really powerful. And that is being able to let go of your message, being able to let go of your ideas. And here's what I mean by that. So many organizations, especially people like us who are building authority, people like us who are thought leaders in some way, feel as though our ideas are really important, and they are, but we need to let people take our ideas and morph them into something else that then they can feel a part of. Rather than us controlling that message, we should allow people to morph it and transform it. So my daughter Reiko and I, in our book FANOCRACY, identified two different types of fandom. There's what we call curative fandom and what we call transformative fandom. And it gets at this particular idea. So the curative fandom is what we talked about briefly earlier, quotes. You put out quotes, you're actually curating a series of quotes.
Yeah.
Transformative fandom is when you actually transform those things into something else. So let me give you a couple of examples of curative versus transformative. In the case of baseball, people who love Major League Baseball statistics, that's curative fandom. It's like the batting averages and whatnot and so forth. However, fantasy baseball is transformative of Major League Baseball into something else. Here's another example. There's the book Hamilton, which is the facts about Alexander Hamilton, you know where I'm going with this, the curated fandom. The transformative fandom is Hamilton the play, a race-bent retelling of the Hamilton story in rap. a transformative version of the same thing. Neither is right nor wrong. Neither is better or worse than the other. They're just different. The challenge we all have is encouraging people to do the transformative type of fandom. And it turns out many companies don't. They try to lock things down. An example of that is Adobe. So Adobe makes Photoshop software. My daughter loves to do create art using Photoshop, and she's really into communicating with other fans of doing art with Photoshop on blogs and through social networks. And everybody laughs at Adobe on those networks because they try to control the way people talk about Photoshop software. They say to their fans, you may not say that you Photoshopped something. That's incorrect. You're not allowed to do that. You must say the image was manipulated by Adobe, trademark R, Photoshop, trademark R software.
Wow.
And my daughter and her friends laugh at Adobe. It's like, this is ridiculous. Here we are, your fans. Here we are talking about how we use your product, and you tell us that that is not how you want us to talk about you. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So getting at your question is, I think that a great way to build followers, to build fans, to get people to engage is to give them permission to change and morph and transform your work into something new. I personally did that with Newsjacking, which we talked about earlier. Many people in my position would have done something different with Newsjacking. And I got advice. I asked a couple of hundred people advice before I launched this. 99% of them told me to do the opposite of what I did. Everyone says everyone said I should trademark Newsjacking and own it as my thing, and not allow other people to use the word that use that concept. I said no. I made it freely available. I own the URL, but I made it freely available. Now there's other people who've written books with the title Newsjacking. There's people who blog about Newsjacking. There's people who use the Newsjacking.
Including yours truly.
Yeah, there's people who use the Newsjacking hashtag all the time. But I'm the guy who invented it. If someone Googles it, I come up at the top of the search results. But because I let people transform my idea into something else, it exploded, and it's now in the Oxford English Dictionary. Had I not done that, and I had said, no, this is mine, there's a trademark against it, you can't use it, it would have died a death.
Now, something tells me you picked up a few things on that from Jerry Garcia.
Yes, you are very so perceptive.
Very, very well known for, in a world where, security is sweeping the audience, looking for anyone that might be taking a picture or video, and again, I've never attended a Dead show. Help me understand what the Grateful Dead did that was so revolutionary.
Yeah, absolutely revolutionary. Another one of my books, by the way, is called Marketing Lessons from the Grateful Dead. So I dug in deep into this topic. I co-wrote that book with Brian Halligan, who's the CEO of HubSpot, and Bill Walton, the NBA Basketball Hall of Famer, wrote the foreword to that book. Bill Walton has seen the Grateful Dead 850 times, if you can believe it. And if you've ever seen Bill on doing a commentary on basketball, he can't talk for more than 10 minutes without saying the Grateful Dead. Anyway, what the Grateful Dead did, which is completely different than every other band, is they allowed fans to bring recording gear into the concerts. Initially, they just let it go rather than try to police it. But then they realized that because so many people were taping shows and they had microphones sticking in the air, they were bothering other people. So they created a taper section. And the taper section was located right behind the soundboard. So Grateful Dead, towards the end of their career, were playing stadiums, so big events, or basketball arenas. So behind the soundboard, there might be 100 people who they actually sold taper tickets to, and then they could set up their recording gear. Now the band said, please record the music And then you can give away the tape. And in the beginning, it was cassette tapes, of course. Then it became
Yeah.
MP3 files. But you can give away the tapes. You can trade the tapes with other people. You just can't sell them.
Yeah.
And they were the only band that did that in the beginning. Other bands then picked up on it. But what was interesting was that fans recognized that every Grateful Dead concert is different. The set list is different. The way they played each song was different. They did something like 3,000 shows in their career. They never once repeated the same type of show. And so therefore, people wanted to listen to the different shows. And then they wanted, like me, wanted to go see a bunch of different shows. So I've been to something like 75 Grateful Dead shows. I mentioned Bill Walton, 850. But they recognized if they let people record the concerts, they were going to make up the revenue in terms of ticket sales. And so that was a really clever thing for them to do. And it built in a massive, massive fan base. So that's actually a chapter in FANOCRACY. Is we called it "Give More Than You Have to."
Right.
Give things away. And one real simple manifestation in the world of digital marketing is so many digital marketers put squeeze pages around content.
Yes.
You know, they require that the only way you can get their white paper or their ebook is to give an email address. But that's actually putting up an adversarial relationship with somebody because you're demanding something of them before you give something in return. It's a very adversarial relationship. So in FANOCRACY, we highly recommend that you do what the Grateful Dead did, is just give the content away. No expectation of anything in return. Give that white paper away completely free. No email required, completely free. What will happen is you'll get way more downloads of it. But then inside the paper, you can have another offer where maybe you do require some kind of registration. But then it's even more powerful because people have already read your stuff. And then if they want to register for something after that, it's an even more powerful lead. So lots of really cool ideas around how to build fans. And some of them actually came from Jerry Garcia and the Grateful Dead.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And so, another thing too, it was really interesting. I think that side of marketing, I hope it's dying off, where everything is gated. And, I remember I had one conversation with a gentleman and he was selling some $300 program that teaches you how to write a book in 24 hours. I said, great, let's talk about it. How do you do it? He goes, well, I can't tell you because then people won't want to buy it.
Yeah.
I'm like, brother, you are in the wrong room.
Yeah, no, it's exactly right. Now, there still is an enormous amount of that going on. There's still millions of people who are doing that form of marketing. I believe the majority of B2B companies still market that way because that's how, and I started as a B2B marketer. That's how B2B marketing has evolved. And, it's a historical accident that the whole white paper thing requires registration because prior to the ability to send a white paper electronically, that you had to physically mail it. So you had to get somebody's physical mailing address in order to get a white paper.
Oh, right.
Out to them. But then marketers said, oh, now we're in the web. We got to do the same thing. Well, no, you don't. You can do anything you want. You can make it completely free. And so I've talked with marketers who have done some A/B testing, and it turns out that when you remove the requirement for an email address, you can have as many as 50 times the number of downloads. So you have to do the calculation.
That's amazing.
Okay, the calculation becomes, okay, so if I maybe I got 2,000 people to give me an email over the course of a year, just because they wanted my white paper, not because they're interested in my company, but because they wanted my white paper. And they probably even gave me a fake email address anyway, just to get it. And then, or 100,000 people exposed to your ideas. I mean, the difference is striking in terms of what's more powerful to build fans and people who might eventually want to do business with you is to make it free. Don't try to coerce them into something using an adversarial relationship.
think about it from a sales perspective too. If they are the ones that are saying, if they're the ones that are always in the relationship, advancing moving the puck forward, they're the ones that are saying yes, yes, yes. You kind of develop that pattern of yeses, and all you're doing is just giving it available, and they'll get off the elevator if they need to get off the elevator. But you're absolutely right. When I go to a website, say it's a SaaS product, I see this a lot. If they don't, and I click on pricing and all it is a contact form, I assume I can't afford it.
Yeah, right. Or you assume that you have to negotiate for it, which is no fun at all.
It's going to be a nightmare. Yeah.
No, I don't want to negotiate. I hate it. Tell me how much the freaking car is, and I'll figure out whether I want to buy it or not. I don't want to have you talk to your manager and all that BS. Yeah. Some people might like that, but that's not the way I do business. So you're absolutely right.
For our agency friends that are listening, try it out. See what happens if you abandon if you can. It's, for us, I think we've absolutely productized a few services that were traditionally in the role of, okay, I got to write up this contract and all this other stuff. Our prices are right on the site. They're like, this is what it is. And there's no contract. It's month to month. If we don't earn, I felt like that, I'll tell you, it's a lot easier to sell when we do it that way. And I hope other agencies will follow suit with that if they can. Right. Because I think it just makes things a lot easier. People jump on the phone, they already know everything. And so at that point, just, answer their final questions before they, pull the trigger on it.
That's right. That's right. And, there's always room to experiment. And, you can try other things. But what we're talking about here is, how do you build fans? Fans are people who will be with you in the long run. Fans will be people who will support you even if you screw up. Fans will be people who will tell about how great you are to their friends. And ultimately, what I love about this concept of fandom is that people are even willing to share your company's logo by wearing the t-shirt or wearing the hat or putting the sticker on a computer. And, we interviewed a bunch of people who have started B2B companies even, where they've become so popular with their fans that their fans are eager to put a sticker on their computer or eager to wear a t-shirt. I had an opportunity to spend a half day with the head of NASA, top guy at NASA, Jim Bridenstine. I wrote a book called Marketing the Moon. It's about the marketing aspects of the Apollo lunar program. That was turned into a PBS miniseries called Chasing the Moon that came out in July 2019. Three-part miniseries, which I was also a producer on. And so Jim Bridenstine said, well, this is the dude that wrote the book Marketing the Moon. If we're going to go back to the moon, I should talk to him. So I ended up having a half day with him in Washington, and his team in Washington, D.C., which was fabulous. And I said to him, Jim, NASA has 45 million Instagram followers. People all over the world. You can't go into any city on the planet without seeing people wearing NASA t-shirts. People put NASA stickers on their computer and on their car. You have tens of millions of fans, and you're a government agency. So, the idea, this idea of fandom, of what I call a fanocracy, is just, to me, it's so interesting. It's so powerful. And it's something that any one of us, if there were people listening besides you and I talking, any one of us can achieve. We can develop fans of our work, of our business, of our company, of our products, of the way we do business.
It's a great way to wrap up the conversation. I hear the helicopter blades whirring above us, so we need to fly you out of here. So David Meerman Scott, again, thank you so much. Congratulations. I've got it on. I've had it on pre-order since the moment you announced it, and I can't wait to read the whole thing. FANOCRACY, turning fans into customers and customers into fans. Absolutely written for our time. Again, I think this is a transformative topic, and it's one that marketers better understand because consumers, it's a different ballgame for them today. They have different expectations, and if marketers are, playing by the old rules, you're making it tough on yourself.
Thanks, Josh. I really appreciate you having me on. It was a really fun conversation.